So good afternoon, everyone. Must apologise for not being able to sit on the floor at the moment. I've got a small problem with my knee. So the format this afternoon will be similar to on previous occasions. Although as there's such a large group and many of you who I've not met before, then I think we'll try to give as much time for questions and answers as possible, and I'll try to refrain from talking for too long, so that we can make sure that this time we have together is as useful as possible for everyone. Well, I'd like to begin by saying a few words on the topic of bhavana, and it's may be somewhat surprising for many of us to find on studying the Buddhist texts that there is not really a word which corresponds exactly to the word meditation as is generally used these days in the Buddha's discourses, and this I believe is a cause of some confusion about the Buddha's teachings, which is, I think, diminishing. Has been diminishing over the past few years, but is still quite commonly found. For instance, the idea that Buddhism is predominantly an inner individualist discipline, one which is lacking a comprehensive social dimension, or that it's possible to extract certain techniques from the body of the Buddha's teaching and develop them independently of context. And I believe that that kind of view is due, to some degree at least, because we have this idea of meditation as being a particular kind of activity or something you do at a certain time and place in a certain posture. So if we look at this word bhavana, the word bhavana probably translates most accurately as cultivation. So it's a path of cultivation, and there are 4 areas of cultivation. There's the cultivation of our relationship to the material world, the cultivation of our relation to the social world. Those are the 2 external aspects. And then there's the cultivation of our emotional world. And that is focused upon finding ways of reducing and eliminating what we call unwholesome mental states, negative mental states, or defilements as they're often caused, and finding skillful means of creating, cultivating, sustaining bringing to maturation the positive, wholesome dhammas, or mental states. And then fourthly, there's the cultivation of wisdom and understanding. So a lot of what is referred to as meditation would lie in the third of those four categories. The cultivation of the emotional world, skillful means techniques of dealing with negative mental states and producing and sustaining wholesome mental states. Now these four areas of bhavana or cultivation are intimately, inseparably connected, and that when certain aspects of this whole process of cultivation is or are developed, then it becomes can become a kind of stress reduction technique or some kind of therapy, which is good. I mean, there's nothing obviously to be said against those things, but the liberating dimension of the Buddha's teachings is lost. So in this understanding of the Buddha's teaching, then putting effort into our relationship to our own physical body, eating good, wholesome and nutritious foods in the right amount, at the right times, getting enough rest, getting enough exercise. These are not mundane externalities. These are intimately connected with your success in the more formal meditation practices. We just have one life, one mind, and everything has to be developed in harmony. So we are generally very technically oriented, and we tend to assume that problems have technical solutions, and in a meditation practice, then there may well be a lot of mental agitation, movement in the mind, and the usual reaction to that is to try to find a particular technique to overcome that problem. But in many cases, the chronic mental agitation experienced in meditation practices is a warning or a signal that our life in the world is out of harmony, and that we are lacking awareness, sense restraint, awareness, not applying our understanding of the way the body and the mind works in our daily life. So if we're taking in too much information, there's no filtering, there's no valuation, there's no gaps, there's no rest from this constant flow of stimulation, then it's unreasonable and unrealistic to expect that meditation practices will be successful, or at least will lead beyond that very superficial noise in the mind. So there are certain problems and challenges that arise in the meditation practice, which can be dealt with by application of specific antidotes and techniques. But we also need to be able to stand back from meditation sessions and to evaluate whether or not the way that we live our life in the world is conducive to the progress in Dhamma. So if we look closely at the kinds of things that pop up in our mind or draw our mind away from our meditation object, then very often we find that they are sense of distress or uneasiness about things that we've said or done, or other people have said or done or not said or not done that we wanted them to say or do. So this is the realm of sila, of morality in the Buddhist sense, which I refer to just now as the cultivation of our relationship to the social world. So it's bringing our intelligence to bear upon the best way to live in families and in communities, and what principles on which to base our conduct and behavior. And the basic principle is that human beings need to feel safe, need to feel warmth, need to feel valued and respected. And that kind of safe, warm environment can be cultivated when we, as a group, whether it's a family or as a community of any kind, make certain commitments. We recognize that it's not possible to make vows or commitments never to get angry or upset with each other, but we can certainly, and it's by no means unrealistic, to make a commitment that no matter how angry I may be, no matter how upset I may be, I will never hit you, I will never abuse you, I will never make you feel unsafe. And that's an act of charity. It's a gift that we give to those around us, the gift of harmlessness. And so the 5 precepts which form basic foundation of Buddhist morality are 5 training, 5 commitments that we make. They are pegs or objects of mindfulness in daily life, which we uphold in order to create the kind of communities that are able to sustain spiritual life, spiritual progress. When we act and speak in hurtful, harmful ways, then it affects our relationship with ourselves. And one who is going to grow in the Dhamma has to have a basic foundation of self-respect and has to like himself or herself. And that basic positive regard towards oneself is created, sustained by voluntarily taking upon oneself certain restrictions of how we act and how we speak, and also by acts of generosity. So in the traditional Buddhist formulation, we say dana and sila provide the foundation for bhavana. So by giving and sharing and refraining from hurting and harming, we create warm, loving communities and families. And internally, there is a marked absence of feelings of guilt and self-recrimination, and a positive regard which gives us the energy and the interest in developing this cultivation in all areas of our life. So we're observing. This is the key virtue. We're observing, we're learning from our experience. If we act in this way, we speak in this way, how does it affect us? How does it affect our mental state? How does it affect our meditation? If we give some time to application of some meditation techniques, how does that affect our general sense of well-being? How does it affect us, our feelings of kindness and clarity of mind and understanding of ourselves and others? It's by keeping a close track of what happens within our life, within our body and mind, within our relationships with others, that we find the willingness to bear with the ups and downs of spiritual life, because we see for ourselves very clearly that it works. That's not to say that we're experiencing any very elevated mental states, at least to begin with, but we see that something is happening, something is changing. There's some transformation taking place, and we feel a few months ago, if somebody had said that or somebody had acted in that way, we would have been hurt and upset all day, and maybe for more than one day. And now we feel just a momentary twinge or some feelings of hurt which very quickly dissolve. So looking for the results of practice, my advice is not to look too high for some special states of elevated consciousness, but just the very simple, everyday, incremental development of wholesome mental states and the weakening of unwholesome mental states. So this cultivation in its in the realm of meditation techniques, which is what most people are familiar with, is, I believe, best seen within the context of this overall development or education or cultivation. One example is that for many people practicing meditation, it's like something you do, something that's quite difficult and challenging, but you do because you believe there's a reward at the end of it. And maybe you call that reward peace or liberation or whatever. But the first thing to recognize is you don't really know what those words refer to. They're just words. But this idea of working, applying yourself to some activity in order to get a reward at the end of it can be a very harmful one in meditation. What tends to happen is that there's like a waterfall, a rush of thoughts and feelings and memories and so on, and it's really hard work. And you keep working and working and working, trying to bring the mind back and bring the mind back and bring the mind back. And then the volume of thought and distraction starts to peter out a little bit, and there starts to be some space between the thoughts and the memories. And then you feel like, oh, now I've got my reward. This is wonderful. And then the mind just like bathes and enjoys that absence of confusion. And it's at that point that you get sleepy, and you lose your mindfulness, because you're relaxing that alertness and attention, which is the heart of Buddhist meditation. So I believe it's a much wiser approach to these practices, to see them in terms of the 4 right efforts, one of the 8 factors of the Eightfold Path. That is to say, the effort to protect the mind from defilements, from unwholesome mental states, the effort to reduce, to weaken, to eliminate negative mental states that do arise or have already arisen, the effort to bring into the mind to create the wholesome, noble mental states that have not yet arisen, and caring for those beautiful and noble mental states that have arisen, and bringing them to maturation. So that pattern, or that orientation, is one which can be applied in every area of cultivation, in our relationship to the material world, in our relationship to the social world, in our relationships, and most clearly and undisguisedly in meditation practice. So we're moving away from saying I'm going to apply this technique in order to get that result. We're saying I'm applying this technique in order to develop my skills in protecting the mind from unwholesome mental states, developing the skill of recognizing and dealing wisely and skillfully with unwholesome mental states that have arisen. I'm learning skills of bringing into the mind appropriate wholesome mental states, and I'm learning how to recognize these and understanding the causes and conditions necessary to uphold in order for those mental states to stabilize and to become more and more refined and more mature. So if we take that view or that vision of meditation, then we can move away from this idea of bad meditation, good meditation, or I'm a bad meditator, or I'm a good meditator, or I can do this, or I can't do it, it's too hard, or whatever, because all those kinds of assessments, are based upon this gaining idea. Now, that's not to say that we don't have any sense of direction in meditation, and it's totally present moment oriented. But the analogy which I feel is most useful in this context is of someone swimming in a lake towards an island in the middle of the lake. And the foolish swimmer lifts his head up out of the water and is totally focused on the island. And two things happen when the foolish person does that. One, because his eye is so fixed on the goal, it seems like it's never going to arrive. You get very frustrated and feel that nothing's happening. But also, and importantly, lifting the head out of the water means that you're not swimming in the most effective way. Your stroke is affected. And so you are, in fact, swimming more slowly than you would otherwise. So the wise person determines on the goal, in this case the island in the middle of the lake, and then puts the best effort into the stroke, making the best possible stroke, swimming in the best possible way. And then every now and again just lifts his head up or her head up just to check that is still swimming in the right direction. So it's just this occasional check, just this occasional tweak or fine-tuning and just making sure that you're still on track. But the bulk of the effort, the majority of the effort is on the quality of the stroke, or in this analogy, the effort to deal with the raw material that you have at your disposal in this particular meditation session. Now, there are so many different ideas about meditation in its narrow sense, and it's not for me to say which is right and which is wrong. But the Buddha did give us one handy shorthand method for or rule of thumb to assess these, and that is, if any teacher or any the meditation center says only this is right, everyone else is wrong, then you should be a bit wary of that teacher or that meditation center. When people start making kind of snide comments about other methods, or being condescending, critical, then it's something to be a little bit wary of. One of the one of the talking points for a long time now is the question of samatha and vipassana. Many of you maybe have heard these words, and they've become very popular ways of talking about meditation, even though in the Buddhist discourses they are hardly ever used. What I would like to say about on this topic is that in our practice, the samadhi, stability, clarity of mind, and the ability to develop insight, clear insight into the nature of the body and mind is only possible when the mind is free of what we call the 5 hindrances. And these are the particular mental obstructions, the particular imbalances or negative mental states which come up most frequently when we give the mind a job to do, such as keeping our attention focused on a particular object, for instance. So this effort to protect the mind, to deal with negative mental states, create and sustain positive mental states. In first periods of meditation, we can say that the negative mental states here we're dealing with are we call the 5 hindrances. And the positive mental states are something we call the 7 bojjhangas, or enlightenment factors. Now, in finding a way of applying these 4 right efforts in terms of the hindrances and the bojjhangas, we'll notice that sometimes the best way for us is a meditation which is completely free of any kind of conceptualization, any kind of discursive thought. The obvious example here being the focusing on the sensation of the breath or of physical sensations throughout the body. But there are also occasions when we find that there is this need which we have to recognize and respect. There is this need to think, and that the mind is just not in the right mood, I guess you'd say, for the non-discursive meditation. And in that case, recognizing that, then we can apply the more discursive kind of meditation, such as investigation of the nature of the body, reflecting thoughts of loving kindness, reflecting on death, for instance. And in this case, we give the mind a little bit of rope to work with. We say, okay, you want to think, you can think, but you have to think on this particular theme. You have to think systematically. And you have to sustain that thinking process within certain very clearly defined boundaries. And when we do that, sometimes we can find that the mind is willing to let go of its attachments, let go of the hindrances much more readily than simply switching to this non-discursive mode immediately. And after developing the discursive meditation for a certain period, the mind is full. It doesn't want to think anymore. It's enough. So it's this gradual weaning away from thought rather than just sort of cutting it off straight away. And both approaches are legitimate, are valid, and work at different times. But if we take the mindfulness of breathing as our main meditation object, then it's not that every time we sit down that the mind is ready to be with the breath. At the tip of the nose, for instance, sometimes the mind's quite agitated, and we've just come from some busy event, and so on. The discursive meditation can well be very useful in allowing the mind to let go of its preoccupations, and just very naturally ready itself to go into the non-discursive kinds of practice, such as mindfulness of breathing. So we have certain basic principles and certain fundamental understanding of what we're doing in meditation, and then within those boundaries, we have a certain flexibility in which we can deal with our mind most effectively at on each particular occasion that we sit down to meditate. But of course, going back to what I've been talking about before, if you're living a very busy life, or you feel sort of guilty about some of the things that or you feel kind of uneasy or not happy with yourself, then often you'll find excuses not to meditate. So it's not just a matter of understanding techniques, but it's finding that consistent willingness and interest in applying those techniques. That's much more difficult. And that's why the other areas of practice are so important. In the practice of anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing, which I mentioned just now, non-discursive meditation. Now, what happens when the mind drifts off, get lost in some memory or some fantasy or imagination? Now, if you recognize that the mind has wandered and you re-establish your attention straight away, then that's fine. That's you're developing a very good mental habit of being aware of what's going on in your mind and making a value judgment that this thought, this memory, this fantasy is not in line with my aspirations. It's not what I intended or intending to be doing right now. So that's developing a very good habit and a strength of mind, or like a kind of mental muscle. But you can intensify that by being a little bit more conscious and even mentally marking something as insubstantial or impermanent or worthless or meaningless. And this is adding a little dimension of wisdom and understanding and insight into the basic meditation, non-discursive meditation practice. So what I really wanted to say is that in at any moment in meditation, there's always a balance between the wisdom faculty, that sense of alertness, awareness, evaluation, and the calming or the tranquility or the stillness, the stability of mind. And in a meditation session, there is a constant need to re-establish that balance. And sometimes if the mind is losing its clarity and the hindrances are increasing, then maybe we need to introduce a little bit more of the wisdom, investigative approach. Sometimes if the mind is too agitated, then to emphasize the stillness, clarity, stability of mind. So if we take these two qualities of stillness, stability on one hand, and this awareness, evaluation, measuring, assessment, as corresponding on this stage of practice to the samatha and vipassana, because these two things are organically connected. It's more a sense of emphasis in practice. Another point, a connected point here, is that if one develops this meditation on the breath, for instance, to a point where we're able to let go of the hindrances, and the mind is very still and bright and clear, and this intense sense of well-being arises in the mind, then is that samatha, or is that vipassana? What is that? Well, I don't think that's such a beneficial path to follow. What can be observed is that think we all of us have heard since we were children that true happiness lies within. It doesn't lie with things outside of ourselves. And every spiritual tradition, every great teacher and guru and roshi and have all said the same kind of thing. And basically we pay lip service to this. But although we might say that we totally agree and believe that, if we're very honest with ourselves and look at the kind of decisions that we make about how we live our life and how we and the values that we live our lives by, then it's not so clear cut at all. There's a conflict there. So one of the values of realizing this state of inner stillness is not that it's the goal of meditation in itself. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing to realize, but most importantly, it gives us that unshakable conviction that yes, true happiness does lie within. This isn't just some mystic teaching or some slogan or other, but it's actually true, and I have experienced just a little bit of that piece, and that experience can then start to affect your relationship to the world around you, to the everyday enjoyments and pleasures. It's not that you suddenly want to become a monk or a nun necessarily, but there's not that kind of grasping, hungry ghost kind of chasing after external pleasures in the same way. There's a re-evaluation, a recognition of the pros and cons, the values, the advantages and disadvantages of those experiences. So we can find that we make quite important and significant changes in our life following an experience of samadhi. Very wise changes in our life. So that's one of the reasons why I'm propounding this idea that just concentrating and just making your mind peaceful is a kind of a dead end, or you should go straight for vipassana, and that's where the real practice lies, and seeing that it's not quite so simple as that. And the kind of changes that we make in our life, or we are willing to make in our life, and this can be in external mundane matters as well as in more profound spiritual matters, we can only dare, or we're only courageous enough to make these changes when we feel safe and when we feel secure and when we feel stable and where we feel we have some kind of bedrock of experience within us. So I think it's so common. We're in this dilemma of better the devil that we do, the devil we don't. Better something, no matter how imperfect and unsatisfactory it is. It's better than nothing, and that's always the fear. Where so many foolish and harmful things we become involved in our lives, and one part of us knows, it's not really right. It's not, but at the same time, if I didn't have this, I wouldn't have anything, and that's one of the major reasons for strong attachment to things. Is saying, if I didn't have this, I'd have nothing at all. And so this inner stability and clarity and bedrock experience of samadhi is one that reassures us that we can let go of these kinds of attachments, and we won't be totally bereft and completely abandoned with nothing in our life at all. So with this inner sense of deep, stable well-being, then we are applying ourselves to observing and learning from experience wherever we are. And, Ajahn Chah would always say, you put out the fire wherever it's burning. So he was criticizing people who think to get on and practice, you need to go to live in a monastery or go on a meditation course, and then you can really do the practice. But he said, wherever you're suffering in your life, that's where the practice is. Work right there. So if you are giving a certain amount of time every day to this more focused application to the 4 right efforts, and then applying those 4 right efforts in your daily life, you're getting a lot of information. The more you observe, the more you learn. And Ajahn Mun, the great teacher, said that everything is teaching us. Every blade of grass is ready to teach us. But it's just that we haven't developed our faculties to the extent that we can learn from these things. So we're purifying our faculties in order to learn, how does suffering arise? What is the cause of suffering? How do we let go of suffering? What is the path to liberation? So these are not philosophical positions or theories, but this is everyday life, learning from our everyday experiences of like and dislike, pain, pleasure, satisfaction, dissatisfaction. But we have to develop this inner faculty of being able to put aside all the usual noise and distraction and being able to learn from what is happening around us and within us moment by moment. So I would like to end the discourse at this point.